A veterinarian looked closer at a bobcat's tracking collar. What he saw made his heart stop. The name engraved there belonged to someone who shouldn't exist. But when the bobcat suddenly collapsed and his heart began to fail, what Dr. Morgan discovered during the desperate resuscitation would reveal a mystery that spanned 6 years. Before you watch, remember to like and subscribe so you don't miss another touching story like this one, and write in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is there. Dr. Michael Morgan froze the moment he looked through the viewing window. Shadow, the bobcat who'd been surrendered to the Wildlife Center just hours ago, was pacing frantically in his reinforced enclosure, vocalizing distress unlike anything Michael had seen in 15 years of wildlife rehabilitation. "Sarah," Michael called to his assistant, "come look at this." Sarah rushed in, her eyes moving from Michael to Shadow, who was still pacing anxiously in the corner of his secure habitat. "What's wrong?" Michael pointed at the tracking collar around Shadow's neck. "Can you see the name tag? I could swear it doesn't say Mitchell." Sarah frowned. "But the woman who brought him, Helen Mitchell, she said her husband Robert was his handler. They had all the proper permits." "I know," Michael said quietly, "but that's not what's engraved on that collar." Helen Mitchell, a widow in her 60s, had surrendered Shadow that morning with tears streaming down her face. Her husband Robert had died 3 months earlier, and without him, the family couldn't maintain the specialized facilities and permits required to care for an exotic animal. "If we can get proper licensing again, we'll come back for him," Helen had said, her voice breaking. "He only ever responded to Robert. He's grieving." Michael had secured Shadow in the largest reinforced habitat they had, watching as the bobcat immediately retreated to the far corner, his ears flattened, his body tense. Stress wasn't uncommon in surrendered animals, but Shadow's behavior seemed more complex, almost protective. Now, standing at the viewing window, Michael grabbed binoculars to get a closer look at the collar. Through the lenses, he could just make out letters engraved on the metal tag. His eyes widened. "That definitely doesn't say Mitchell," he muttered. "What does it say?" Sarah asked. "I can't tell from here. The angle's wrong, and he won't hold still." Michael lowered the binoculars. "I need to remove that collar anyway. It looks too tight, but approaching him will be dangerous." Michael entered the enclosure area slowly, speaking in calm, low tones. "Hey, Shadow, it's okay, buddy, I just want to help." Shadow's response was immediate and violent. He snarled, his powerful body tensing, teeth bared in warning. When Michael took another step, Shadow struck at the safety barrier between them, claws fully extended. Michael backed away quickly, his heart pounding. This wasn't normal defensive behavior. Shadow was protecting something, and that something was the collar. Over the next 3 days, Michael tried everything. He brought enrichment items, raw meat, spoke gently during feeding times. Slowly, cautiously, Shadow began to trust him enough to eat while Michael was nearby. But any attempt to approach the collar resulted in immediate aggression. On the 4th day, Michael finally managed to photograph the tag clearly using a zoom lens during feeding time. Back in his office, he enlarged the image on his computer screen. His heart stopped. The name engraved on the metal wasn't Mitchell. It was Anderson. Jessica Anderson. "Sarah, come here," Michael called urgently. She appeared in the doorway. "What is it?" "The collar. It says Anderson, not Mitchell." Michael was already typing on his computer. "Shadow's been registered with the Mitchells for 6 years, but he's clearly older than that. He has to be at least 10. Where was he before?" A quick search revealed Jessica Anderson, a former wildlife researcher who'd worked at a facility 2 hours away. Michael dialed the number listed. "Hello?" a woman's voice answered. "Miss Anderson, this is Dr. Michael Morgan from Mountain Ridge Wildlife Center. I think I might have found your bobcat." There was a long silence. "Shadow?" Her voice broke. "You found Shadow? Would you be willing to come identify him?" "Yes, oh my God, yes, I'll be there tomorrow." That night, Michael stayed late reviewing Shadow's records. Something didn't add up. The Mitchells had permits for 6 years. But where had Shadow been before that? And why had Helen never mentioned a previous owner? The next morning, Michael arrived early to check on Shadow. The moment he looked through the viewing window, he knew something was wrong. Shadow was lying on his side, his breathing rapid and shallow. His pupils were dilated, and foam was visible around his mouth. "Sarah!" Michael shouted, already running for the medical kit. "Call Dr. Chen. Shadow's in distress." By the time Sarah reached him, Michael was preparing sedation equipment. His collar. Look at his neck. It's swollen. The collar's too tight. It's been cutting off circulation. "Oh my God," Sarah breathed. "How long has it been like that?" "I don't know, but we need to remove it now." Michael's hands were steady despite the fear coursing through him. He's going into shock. Dr. Sarah Chen, the center's wildlife veterinarian, arrived within 20 minutes. Together, they carefully sedated Shadow, though even unconscious, his breathing was dangerously irregular. "Heart rate is dropping," Sarah reported, her hand on Shadow's chest. 80 beats per minute. That's too low." Michael worked quickly, using bolt cutters to carefully sever the collar. The moment it came free, he saw the extent of the damage. The skin underneath was raw, infected, swollen to twice its normal size. The collar had been slowly tightening as Shadow's neck muscles had grown over the years, and the stress of losing Robert had made everything worse. "We need to clean this wound and start antibiotics immediately," Dr. Chen said, already preparing supplies. But as Michael began cleaning the infected area, Shadow's body went rigid. "His heart rate is dropping fast," Sarah said urgently. 60, 50, 45. Dr. Chen pressed her stethoscope to Shadow's chest. "We're losing him. Start compressions." Michael positioned his hands carefully on Shadow's rib cage. Performing CPR on a wild bobcat was dangerous, even when sedated. One wrong move and those claws could do serious damage. But there was no choice. He began compressions, counting under his breath. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Dr. Chen prepared an injection of epinephrine. "Keep going. 15 seconds. 30, 45. "Heart rate is still dropping," Sarah reported, her voice tight. 30 beats per minute. Michael didn't stop. His arms were burning from the effort, but he maintained steady, rhythmic compressions. 1 minute. "Come on, Shadow," Michael said through gritted teeth. "You didn't survive a 6 years to die now. Fight." Dr. Chen administered the epinephrine directly into Shadow's IV line. 1 minute, 15 seconds. "Still no response," Sarah said, tears in her eyes. 1 minute, 30 seconds. Then, a twitch. Shadow's hind leg moved slightly. "Wait," Dr. Chen said, pressing her stethoscope to his chest again. "I've got something. Faint, but it's there." Shadow took a sudden, gasping breath. Then another. His chest began rising and falling more regularly. "Heart rate's coming back," Dr. Chen reported, her voice shaking with relief. 50, 60, 70, 80. He's stabilizing. Michael sat back, his arms trembling from exertion, sweat dripping down his face. Thank God. They spent the next hour cleaning and treating the wound, administering antibiotics, and monitoring Shadow's vital signs. By the time Jessica Anderson arrived that afternoon, Shadow was breathing steadily, though still heavily sedated. Michael led Jessica down the quiet hallway toward the enclosures. "I need to warn you, he nearly died this morning. The collar was cutting off circulation. We had to resuscitate him." Jessica's hand flew to her mouth. "Oh my God, is he? He's stable now, but Jessica—" Michael paused. "How did he lose his collar? Why didn't you remove it?" "I didn't put it on him," Jessica said quietly. "The research facility did when he was just a cub. It was supposed to expand as he grew, but—" She stopped, her eyes filling with tears. "I lost him 6 years ago during a facility transfer. The transport van was in an accident. Shadow escaped. I searched for months. I thought he was dead." They reached the viewing window. Inside, Shadow was awake now, resting on an elevated platform. His neck was bandaged, but his amber eyes were alert. Jessica pressed her hand against the glass. "Shadow," she whispered. Shadow's ears rotated forward. He stared at her for a long moment. Then, slowly, he stood and approached the glass, pressing his broad head against it where her hand rested. "He remembers you," Michael said softly. At that moment, voices echoed from the lobby. Michael turned to see Helen Mitchell walking toward them, followed by a younger woman. Helen stopped when she saw Jessica. For a long moment, the two women simply stared at each other. "You're Jessica Anderson," Helen said finally. "The name on the collar." Jessica nodded, unable to speak. "My husband found him on a rural road," Helen said quietly. "He'd been hit by a car. Robert spent months rehabilitating him. We thought we'd never know where he came from. I lost him during a transport accident," Jessica said, her voice breaking. "I searched everywhere." Helen's eyes filled with tears. Robert loved him. When Robert died, Shadow grieved so deeply we didn't know how to help him. That's why we brought him here. The two women stood in silence, both looking at Shadow, who watched them from inside his enclosure. Then Helen did something unexpected. She reached out and took Jessica's hand. "Would you like to see him together?" Jessica nodded, tears streaming down her face. Together, they approached the viewing window. Shadow looked at Helen, then at Jessica, then back again. He made a soft, chuffing sound, a vocalization of contentment, recognizing both of the people who had saved his life. "He remembers both of us," Helen whispered. Over the following weeks, as Shadow recovered from his surgery, Helen and Jessica visited him together. They shared stories. Helen about the years Shadow spent with Robert, Jessica about his early life at the research facility. They discovered that Shadow had lived 2 complete lives, loved by 2 families who'd never known about each other. When Shadow was finally healthy enough, they made a decision together. Jessica had the proper facilities and permits. Helen had the experience of caring for him. Together, they would share custody. Jessica would provide his home, and Helen would visit regularly, keeping the bond that Robert had built alive. The day Shadow was released to Jessica's facility, both women were there. As he stepped into his new habitat, one that felt familiar because Jessica had recreated elements from his original enclosure, he turned back to look at them both. And for the first time since Robert's death, Shadow vocalized not in distress, but in contentment. He had found not one family, but 2 hearts that refused to let him go. Did you enjoy this story? If you were Helen or Jessica, and you discovered someone else had loved and cared for Shadow all these years, would you have been willing to share him? Yes or no? Let us know in the comments below. If you like the story, subscribe to this channel and leave a like. Thanks so much for listening. See you in the next video. Have a super day.